Tonight on Politics Unplugged, the chief of Arizona schools now faces a tough primary challenge. So we asked Tom Horne why he deserves to keep his job. Plus, Arizona Attorney General Kris Mayes leads the charge to block the Trump tariffs. We'll look at what happens next. In the first debate in a special election turns hot. What's the latest in Arizona's race to replace the late Raul Grijalva? The panel weighs in now on Politics Unplugged.
Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch. This is Politics Unplugged, and State School Superintendent Tom Horne has been a fixture in Republican politics here in Arizona for decades. So it was a surprise to learn he'll face a high-profile primary challenge in next year's election. State Treasurer Kimberly Yee is running for his job, and Tom Horne is here to talk about that, the race and other things. Thank you very much for being here today. First of all, let's get your response to, let's get your response to Kim Yee challenging you in the primary, saying that you're not doing a good enough job in this sense.
Yeah, well, I've been an advocate of parental choice ever since the 1990s. When I was in the legislature and as chair of a conference committee, I killed a bill that would have restricted the growth of charter schools. As a result of that, during my first two terms as state superintendent, we became the first in the country of the 50 states in percentage of kids in charter schools. I'm also a strong supporter of ESAs, and I've been an advocate for them because I think if a child's needs are not being met in the public school, the parent should have a right to find a school that doesn't meet the child's needs. I have established two principles. One is every expenditure has to be for a valid educational purpose, and secondly, it has to be a reasonable cost according to market prices. Hoffman came out with this crazy theory.
You're talking about Senator Jake Hoffman.
Jake Hoffman, yeah.
Yeah, who is actually stood side by side with Kimberly Yee during her announcement. He's a big supporter of her.
Right. Yeah. He recruited Yee.
Yeah.
He announced he was going to get someone to run against me because he has this crazy theory that I don't have the authority to do any limitation at all. Anything a parent asks for, if they have money in their account, should just be paid. Well, if I had adopted that philosophy, here's some of the things I would have paid. A $5,000 Rolex watch, a $24,000 golf simulator, which I expect was for the parents rather than the kid, over a $1,000 fancy Mont Blanc pen, and believe it or not, a vasectomy testing kit was asked out of education funds. If that had been done, or if Yee were elected and she did it, paid anything, as she's saying she would, then it would be big news, the public would react, and the longevity of the ESA program would be challenged. And believing in ESAs, I think it's very important. During my first 2.5 years in office this time, we've increased the number of participants in ESAs from 12,000 to 87,000. So I want it to survive, and it won't survive if crazy payments are made.
And it's grown in students. Obviously, it's grown in price as well. And to be fair, Kim Yee has said that you overstepped your authority. You believe you do have this authority to hold people accountable for what they're using this public money to spend these funds on.
And that's not only my view. I have judicial support for that, because I'm not the final say. The parents can appeal to an administrative law judge and ultimately the state board, and a number have done that. And the issue of my authority was in contest in every single one of those cases, and we won them all. So I have very strong judicial authorities that I do have that authority. I would think any administrator of taxpayer funds would have the obligation to keep it honest and reasonable.
So do you think there should be any other guardrails on this program? We know that the Democrat governor, Katie Hobbs, has been talking about this for a while, and Democrats want to put guardrails on this program. Where are you on this? I mean, for example, like, should there be an income tax? There should be a cap on income. Should a family or someone making $500,000 a year be able to use public money to send their kid to a private school?
Right. Well, I'm an administrator. I do whatever the legislature tells me to do, and I'm going to leave it up to them. I have enough controversies on my plate right now.
Sure, but you're also the head of the school. Do you have a philosophy? What's the philosophy on this? Do you think wealthy people should pay their kids' way to private schools?
Well, I'm leaving that to the legislature. I have lots of controversies. Right now I have a controversy over whether we should pay out $5,000 watches and a lot of crazy things. These are crazy philosophies that Hoffman came up with, and I'm surprised to see Kim Yee adopting them. She's become the tin can on Hoffman's wagging tail.
So, I mean, obviously you think enough of your oversight of this program to block these types of expenditures, and I think a lot of people out there would applaud you for doing some of that. Yeah. Program overall, is there anything else that needs to be fixed?
Yes.
That could be done better?
Yes. When I took office, there were 12,000, and I have the same amount of personnel now with 87,000 that I had with 12,000. So we need more personnel. At one point, there was a problem with getting behind, and there was too much of a delay in reimbursing people. We've solved that for the time being, but we do need more personnel to deal with a much larger constituency.
Okay, well, so let's talk about Prop 123. Now, this is the extension of a funding mechanism for education. Basically, it takes money from the state land trust, puts it into education. Now, it's set to expire. It may have already expired, and there's a fight now to try to get it back on the ballot to extend that. Now, Republicans at the legislature have talked about potentially putting in that legislation, whether it passes this year, which looks unlikely, or next year, to get it on the ballot, protecting ESA program in the Constitution. Do you think, would you support a constitutional protection on the ESA program, considering you've already pointed out some issues with that? Do you think it should be voter protected?
Yes, I would support it, but what's more important is I've been advocating for higher teacher salaries. We absolutely have to, and Prop 123 would provide for more money for teacher salaries. We absolutely have to raise teacher salaries. We're losing more teachers now than are coming into the profession. And if we don't do something strong, we could end up with 0 teachers. You can imagine how the public would react to that. And so every time I've given a State of Education speech to at the legislature, I've emphasized we've got to raise teacher salaries.
Protecting the ESA program constitutionally, you're a member of the state legislature. You understand if it's protected in the Constitution, it makes it harder to make changes legislatively, because any change you have to basically go back to the voters to do. You comfortable then that kind of protection on this program? I'm
comfortable with it, but it's not my big issue. My big issue is we've got to raise teacher salaries with Proposition 123.
All right, and let's wrap up with this. And we've seen this issue pop up in other races across the country. It could become an issue in your race. You're 80 years old. You'll be 81 years old when you're elected to what would be your 4th term as Superintendent of Public Instruction. What would you say to somebody who's thinking out there or accuses you of saying, hey, maybe you can't do the job anymore?
Well, individuals age at different rates. 7 days a week, I do 80. I do on the stair stepper, and I do 84, the equivalent of 84 stories in 40 minutes. So that shows that I'm in great physical shape.
All right, thank you very much for stopping by here, Mr. Horne, and we'll see you next time. And good luck on the campaign.
Thank you.
And still ahead is Arizona Attorney General Kris Mayes has been taking on President Trump in court, and she has been winning. Our panel weighs in when Politics Unplugged continues. Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. Arizona Attorney General Kris Mayes has been taking on President Trump in court and winning. This week she won a court order halting the president's tariffs. Here to talk about that and the rest of this week's headlines, Democratic consultant Tony Cani and Republican Barrett Marson. Let's start with you, Tony. This was a win for her and 11 and 10 other Democratic attorneys general who signed on to this lawsuit. She's been helping to lead the charge on this. But another subsequent appeals court did pause this ruling, saying that the tariffs can stay in place for now.
Yeah, which as she said, wasn't unexpected, because that's just like an administrative stay where they're saying, okay, give us time to review the appeal. But the central premise, like the current standing of the law, is that the way he initiated the tariffs that he did using IEEPA, saying it was a national emergency. He tried to use that as a shortcut to get around procedures that existed, what Congress's role is, and the court is saying you can't do that. And so Mayes co-led this effort, which is in line with a lot of the stuff she's done since she's been in office, where she's really been focusing on like consumers and whether or not people's cost of living, people being taken advantage of, and she won. And she's really confident that when this gets heard at the next level, that she's going to win again.
And what do you get your take on this? I mean, again, she has signed on to a lot of lawsuits. This seems like a pretty big initial win for her, even though it's stayed for now.
Yeah, we need the big board to keep track of all her lawsuits and one-loss record and everything. Look, I suspect that this has a lot of ways to go and a lot of ups and downs. This is not the final result, and Trump is steamrolling everyone, and sometimes the courts are agreeing with him, and sometimes they're blocking him, and it's just a big mix, and you never know how the Supreme Court is going to rule, but we are early in this game, and so far, Trump is winning a lot of his lawsuits, and he's being held up on certainly some of them. And
do you think that this has been good for Arizona economy and business and whatnot? I've talked to a lot of business leaders. They're still very much on edge right now because the tariffs create this economy of uncertainty.
Well, and that's the thing. Well, it's not just that the tariffs create a bit of an uncertainty. It's that they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. That's literally creating so much uncertainty for a lot of businesses. I think they just want whatever's going to happen, and then I can deal with it. And that's sort of been the problem is even Trump is, one day it's 145% on China, the next day it's 60% or pick a number. And there is no real rhyme or reason, and there's no finality. And I think that's what just businesses want. They want the finality of his big, beautiful bill and the tariffs and everything, so that they can then start planning for the next decade.
Yeah, and let's talk about the politics of this a little bit. I mean, it's one thing to be doing this, the Democratic Attorney General, obviously for her base, they love this. They love all this, that she is taking on Donald Trump. But is it smart politically? Because this is a state that did vote for Donald Trump, and they, ostensibly would want to see him get his agenda through.
Yeah, this is a state that voted for Donald Trump. It's also a state that the most recent poll that just came out, the other day, I don't know if we're going to talk about it.
We'll be talking about that later.
It showed, if you go in the crosstabs, that Arizonans are against this tariff policy. They do not think it's a good idea. And I think that's because we know how important international trade is to our economy and, as people who are at a border state. And so I think that it's good politics. And on top of that, the issue here is that he's taking illegal actions and the Attorney General is standing up to him. And whether or not that's good politics or not, I think it is. It's the right thing for her to do in that office.
One of the things that, I just don't know, Trump is obviously incredibly committed to the tariffs, and he says long term, it's going to be great for America. But voters, Americans, we don't look 2 years ahead, right? We look at today, my pocketbook today, how I'm doing today. And I think that's where Donald Trump runs into the political problem and why, Kris Mayes is taking up some of these lawsuits for sure. Okay,
let's shift focus now. Let's talk a little bit about the superintendent, that race. We just had Tom Horne on. Now, as a Democrat, you guys popping the popcorn out there, you guys celebrating that you're going to see a very competitive, robust primary in that. Do you see this as giving you, your party, an opportunity to get that office back?
Yeah, and I think that it's not even just that there's a primary. It's that the primary central fight is about whether or not there should be unfettered access to tax dollars for things, for wealthy people to buy cellos and Rolex watches and things like this. And look, Tom Horne, he is only standing up to this stuff because he was forced to by the public. And now he's taken some steps, and look at what is happening on the right, where they're saying, no, we want this to be unfettered. And so that debate, let's let them have it.
I can't believe how much these limoncellos cost. I get them at bars, and everyone's talking about these limoncellos. Look, Tom Horne has a point. He can, talk about how he's going to bring Doge, essentially, which is very popular, to ESAs and root out.
Wait, Doge is popular?
Doge is pretty amongst the Republicans.
Okay,
it is.
Okay.
And I'm rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Cellos, golf simulators, Rolex watches, all that stuff. Kimberly Yee, though, she has a lot of education policy experience. I believe she was like chair of the Senate Education Committee. She worked in the Schwarzenegger administration in California doing education policy. So she is steeped in education, even if it is California education policy. She's steeped in education. So it'll be an interesting fight. I think for Tony's side, they need someone with a heartbeat, and I'm not sure that they have that person yet.
Okay, nobody with a heartbeat, huh?
No, I mean, look, I remember people saying the same thing about Kathy Hoffman when she ran. Like, who is this person? Like, there are people who support public education in a state that supports public education when Republicans are very, very focused on allowing vouchers to give money to rich people. And so I think that even if we had people who doesn't have a heartbeat, and we will, that they're in a tough position. I think that they're in a bad position here.
All right, and a final question, I'll leave it to you. What is going to be the defining issue of this Republican primary for that important superintendent race? Is it going to be ESAs or something else?
Well, it is going to be ESAs because that's the playing field that Turning Point wants. But remember, there's literally about 85,000 families who are on the ESA and 800,000 voters in the Republican primary. So it is a minority, and those voters will care about other things other than just ESAs. They are interested in school choice, but they are interested in having an education system that produces good results.
All right, then right now we're going to have to take a break, but when we return, we'll look at a race for Congress in District 7. This week's debate got a little heated. That's next on Politics Unplugged. For in-depth on the issues, check out the Politics Unplugged podcast. This week, we talk with Arizona Republic columnist Bill Goody-Kuntz. The Politics Unplugged podcast drops every Sunday evening wherever you get your podcasts. And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. We're coming up on a special election to replace the late Raul Grijalva in Congress. And the debate between the candidates got a little contentious. Let's bring in our panel to talk about that. Thanks for sticking around here for another segment, gentlemen.
Well, but hold on, I notice you haven't invited me onto the podcast in quite some time. I don't know what I've done to offend you.
I believe I was on the podcast when you were complaining how you weren't on the TV show, so.
Your rider is just too much. Your demands for green-only M&Ms and things like that is just too much. But let's start with you. You know, in a former life, you used to be a reporter. You used to do a lot of
some good work.
And one of your beats, Southern Arizona, you were the head political guy for the Daily Star down there. What's your take on this race? It's got a little heated down there. Primaries usually do.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of agreements on the issues, so you just have to.
It's personality
based.
And there is. I mean, whether it's Deja Fox, Daniel Hernandez, or Adelita Grijalva, I think they're on 90%, 95% of the issues, they're going to vote the same way.
Yeah.
So then, you know, turns out about generation and personality. You know, they had a debate this week on PBS, and quite frankly, I thought Deja did well.
Yeah.
I was interested. I thought she came off a little too polished maybe and complaining a bit too much about the generational change. Daniel Hernandez is all of 10 years older than her.
Sure.
And she's, you know, talking about the old people on the stage. 35 is not old. If it is
Breaking news.
Yeah,
Tell yourself
53 is, you know, I guess age 54. But I found it interesting, and, you know, there was a lot of sort of the slings and arrows at Adelita Grijalva because she's seen as the front runner and obviously the daughter of the congressman. So it's interesting, but it is really more personality based than policy based because the top three agree on most stuff.
And what's your sense? What's the energy down in Southern Arizona among Democrats? Do they want change, or do they want to keep with the same last name, the name they've known and trusted for so long? Or are they looking to make a big change?
I mean, I think that they know that Adelita has a long history in elected office, from the school board to the supervisor's office, and so I think that, you know, a lot of these voters do know her. I think the defining issue in this election is, who do they trust who will stand up to Trump? That's the defining issue with Democrats right now. And, you know, I think that that's going to be a challenge for Daniel Hernandez, who recently ran for Congress in a more bipartisan, I'm a deal maker, was rated the second most conservative member in the legislature by Progress Arizona, like, you know, for Democrats. And so he's sort of redefined himself as a progressive. And so that's where this fight's going to happen. It's like, is he going to be willing to, like, stand up when the time comes?
You know, look, to borrow a Donald Trump phrase, I think Democratic voters do want fight, 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 you know, and I do think that all three of them are prepared to fight. Yes, Daniel Hernandez has been bipartisan, but, you know, Tony argues most times about, you know, Democrats and Republicans need to work together to get things done. I mean, this guy argues for bipartisanship, but no, we don't need a fighter, you know, or a person who can work across the aisle. You know, look, Daniel has certainly worked with Republicans, and I think that bodes well. You know, I've heard complaints from Democrats that Raul Grijalva, over the years, could have gotten more done, except for he wanted 100%. He wouldn't take 60% or 70%. It was always about getting everything, and he didn't make the deals to make real change, even if it wasn't all the change you wanted. So I think there is a desire to get someone who will actually bring things to Southern Arizona and the United States. Right. And Daniel may have that leg up.
And let's shift gears here. We also saw another way too early poll in the governor's race. Obviously, it's way too early, but hey, triple digits is getting hot in Arizona. It gives us something to talk about right now. And this new poll from Noble Predictive Insights showed that in the governor's race, at least in the Republican primary right now, that Karen Taylor Robson is holding kind of a slim lead, 24 points to 17 over Andy Biggs. In that, it was also interesting in that poll. A lot of undecideds in that 17. I think another 17%. And I think Charlie Kirk, who's not even running in that race and who has endorsed Andy Biggs, got 17%. Now, I look at a poll like that, and if I'm Karen Taylor Robson, I'm like, I'm only getting 24%.
Yeah, I don't think this is a good news poll for her if you look at that, with the fact that, like, they polled all these other people who aren't in the race, and she was getting that percentage. So I think, you know, she's advertising, maybe that's going to go up, but I think that's where at least she started. And so I know there's also a competing poll that came out from some people who support Biggs, and so you have to look at that with a grain of salt. That shows that when it is head-to-head, which I would have loved to see a head-to-head number from this poll, that he is leading by quite a bit. But again, this is so early.
It's so early.
One of the things that was in that poll was the question of, like, are you loyal to Trump? Kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about. And there was a high percentage of people who supported Robson who said, oh, they're loyal to Trump. But there's like footage of her trashing Trump. And so they're going to probably put that on TV, but it's so early.
You know,
and before it's going to be a messy, expensive primary.
Before you double down and say, yeah, again, it's way too early. There is one candidate that's already spending seven figures in ad buys, and that candidate is Karen Taylor Robson. Shouldn't she have a little bit more of a comfortable margin, even in a way too early poll?
Yeah. But the problem with that is this poll was done just at the beginning of her spend, so it doesn't really take into that.
But she spent $20 million.
Yeah, but that was
a few years ago.
You know what? But you're right. But that was a long time ago. She didn't win, and she came a few points from Kari Lake, who was a, love her, hate her, and everyone either loved her or hated her, was a unique figure in Arizona politics. Okay. But I think Karen is, Karen Taylor Robson is going to be up with money on TV and on your computer, your Facebook, everything, and she's not really going to go away. And if Donald Trump endorses you and you don't have the money to tout that endorsement, did he really endorse you? And Andy Biggs is sort of in that phase right now where he doesn't have $20 million in the bank that he can just blow and tell voters even before ballots or even before the calendar turns to 26. Karen Taylor Robson has that kind of money, and she will tell voters about her connection with Donald Trump.
And we're almost out of time, but real quick, though, it looks like, too, in a head-to-head matchup in the general election, it's a margin of error race. Yeah. I'd expect it's going to be like that from now until November.
Yeah, and both those polls did show that Hobbs has a small lead over whoever emerges. And again, it's very early, but I think it shows that, like the same dynamics in the last race. She's got a real chance of winning, and people who doesn't think she do, they're not paying attention.
All right, thanks a lot here, but that is all the time we have. Be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged. Good night.